Welcome to the Pick Up Korea podcast, and today I want to discuss why Korean girls ghost. So this is a very common question, a lot of guys reach out about text game tips, text game advice, and one of the most common questions is, I got a few numbers and maybe, I got 5 numbers today and 2 or 3 of them just fully ghosted, didn't even open the message, or responded a couple times and disappeared. So in today's podcast, I want to cover why does this happen? Is it normal? At what rate maybe is it normal? And so on and so forth. So in Korean, basically ghosting is called jamsu, right? And it basically means when a girl suddenly stops replying to your texts, either off the get-go or maybe you're having a conversation and it just suddenly she stops responding, she ghosts, and it seems like it's the end of the world, right? If you're obsessed with this one girl or whatever, right? First of all, it's important to understand that in Korean culture, they do have this culture of saving face, which is sort of like, avoiding any awkward confrontation, any explaining themselves and so on, and sort of just... if they can, it's easier to say, for example, say she has a boyfriend, but she liked you in the interaction at the bar or in the Starbucks or on the street. Rather than saying that, sometimes it's just easier for them to save face and not respond, right? And even in those kind of situations, sometimes you'll hit them up, a month later, 2 months later, in what I call the pickup pinch and ping, which is basically, you have a bunch of numbers. Say you got, for example, 20 numbers this month, right? And say, a bunch of them fall out, you don't meet up. Then a month or two later, sending them all sort of a status update, a fun activity you're doing, a cool restaurant you found, a unique cafe, an event you went to, a festival, and then, kind of mass pinging those updates and then kind of seeing that some of them actually revive. Some of them, maybe they were busy then, in a bad mood, had a boyfriend and broke up. So you can kind of sometimes even revive these ghosted leads through that method. However, that being said, there are several reasons, as I mentioned, saving face. Maybe they have a boyfriend. Maybe they're going through a lot. Maybe they are doubtful to meet you, maybe they had fun, but they didn't really feel like they knew who you were, right? So there could be several reasons. And ultimately in Korea, there's no social obligation to respond, to chit chat, even if it's in the street, even if it's on text message. So there's less of that sort of social etiquette that people might be used to in Western countries, right? One major reason is ultimately them having sort of anxiety or pressure about talking to you in English maybe and meeting you up. So there's the phenomenon of English 영어 울렁증, which literally means the fear of speaking English, right? So it's sort of like whenever they see you, whenever they get your text, say that you're chatting in only English and their English is not that good. It's kind of this fear of making a mistake, this fear of saying the wrong thing, this fear of fucking up, right? And so, this is a very real phenomenon. Or sometimes they'll even be comfortable in, in person, but then in text, they get nervous, they kind of second guess themselves, or vice versa, right? On the other hand, you have girls that are comfortable in texting because they can think about it. They can use, Papago, Naver Translate, Google Translate, but then afraid to meet up in person because they can't or don't feel like they can communicate, right? And so ultimately, that can be one of the reasons. This sort of English anxiety could be a reason that some of the leads fall out. Other reasons, of course, you can help mitigate that by learning Korean, even if it's basic Korean. That can really go a long way in improving your odds, improving your results, right? Another issue could be that in Korea, it's such a busy society, fast-paced. They have, if they're working at a Korean company, sometimes they work long hours. Sometimes they have the company dinners and drinking, also known as 회식, right? Sometimes they have the overtime work, yagen. They have so many obligations that Basically you got their number and then you chatted a bit, and then it's sort of just through the busyness of the week, you just kind of fall down on the list. So if you ever look at an attractive girl's phone, you'll notice that she has tons of, chats with guys, chats with friends, social group, like a coworker group chats, other group chats. So you can easily fall down on the list and she just forgets to open the message, right? That's another common phenomenon. And so that being said, as I mentioned in earlier podcasts, it is really good to get the meetup within the week, actually within a few days of getting the number, if possible. And if not, then, sending out, as I mentioned, the pickup pinch and pings every now and then to see if she, to kind of like re-register on her radar. Maybe situations have changed, maybe times have changed, right? Another thing is just really their lifestyle. Some girls are getting up at weird hours, working all night. Maybe they're a hostess, maybe they are a bar worker. Maybe your text timing just doesn't match up. That can be another issue in itself, right? And ultimately, too, a major part is really the interaction in itself, right? And so that's why I always say that text game, to a degree, there is text game. There is a skill in it, right? Learning the basics, learning the fundamentals, not fucking up those, right? So, not over texting, not under texting at the same time, not being a weirdo, sending weird texts, always, pitching a date at the right time. These kind of things are essential, right? Mirroring her rhythm, staying positive, sharing your story, sharing your status updates, things along these lines. However, that being said, if you don't have good interactions, ultimately, you're going to have a bunch of very, very weak or flaky numbers, flaky leads, right? And so ultimately, how do you get ghosted less is really having better interactions, right? And so that means, a lot of guys, though, whether it's in a bar or on the street in the daytime, they will do these very quick interactions and just kind of extract the phone number. And, that can work sometimes. If you're doing that in mass, sometimes you'll get some results from it. But that being said, the better the interaction is, if you can kind of get the girl to open up, you can share your story. She has a little bit of an idea who you are, why you're here, what you do. She sees you as a real person, not just some random guy that, asked her number on the street, right? She sees you as an individual. You built a vibe. You vibed on different topics, a range of emotions. There was some flirtation there, some teasing, some, subtle seduction, change in emotions. And you spent some time together rather than just a minute and getting the phone number. Maybe you spent 5 or 10 minutes together chatting on the street, in the Starbucks, wherever, in a bar. Then in that case, of course, you're going to have a better number. Also, if she was more compliant, so say that you met her in the street, you guys kind of bounced to a different area, you walked together, maybe you moved to the side of the road, she followed you a few steps, or in the bar, you guys chatted, you bounced her upstairs to go play some darts, bounced downstairs, chatted a bit, she had to go with her friends. If there was some kind of compliance, she was following your lead, she invested a bit in the interaction, she was emotionally responsive, right? And she seemed, or she agreed to give the number in a, at least seemingly enthusiastic way, then those are all can be some good signs. That being said, you can have a perfect interaction. You can have a interaction where literally, it's perfect from A to Z. You guys connect, there's a good vibe, you spend time together, there's some flirtation, you exchange some range of emotional topics. She knows who you are. She opens up about herself. She follows your lead. She invests. She gives her number. She's excited to meet up. And then even in those cases, right, where it seems like everything's executed right, she can also ghost as well, right? So that being said, the best thing you can do is to improve your interactions, to get better in your interactions, but you can never ultimately get rid of ghosting because, as mentioned, there are several reasons within your control. Of course, the ones that are in your control is making it a better set, but there are also several reasons that she could ghost that are outside of your control. As mentioned, English pressure, 영어 울렁증, has a boyfriend, dating other guys, company obligations, social obligations, and so on and so forth, right? And so, ultimately, that being said, when you go out for a given session in the day or night, you're going to want to do the best you can, do the best approaches you can, have the best interactions you can, and ultimately, getting a decent amount of leads, because even if they're all really, really good interactions, you're going to have a degree of girls that just ghost and flake, right? So, so cut out there for a second. Another issue could be when they're ghosting. Sometimes you'll get girls that respond at very weird, rates. Maybe they respond once a day or twice a day or once every 2 or 3 days. Those can also still work out. Some guys will think that they're ghosting or that it's not worth it, but really ultimately, it really just matters that they're responding and that they agree to the meetup, right? So it's very easy to read too much into something, whereas really the only way if she's into it, if she's interested, is if she responds and she agrees to a meetup, right? And so it's not really useful to play all of these guessing games or what have you, because on the other end, you also have girls who, text every, you send a message, they respond right away within a minute, right? Within even a minute, they respond. And from there, you have this long, long chat for a few days, even 2-3 days in a row, and just tons of texting, and then they don't meet up, right? So you can't really base it just on their responsive rate, right? You always want to execute the program, always want to funnel them for a date. At the end of the day, of course, there will be some girls who block you for various reasons. Maybe they gave you the number out of pressure. Maybe you weren't, you were extracting the number rather than, a mutual exchange. Another reason could be that she has a boyfriend and he found out about it. That's actually more common than you would think. And there are actual ways to check on KakaoTalk. If you're in Korea meeting Korean girls, there are ways to check if they blocked you, but ultimately it's really not worth your time. It's just better to, if they kind of disappear, if their profile goes blank, it's just really best to move on, or maybe hit them up later in a status update, and maybe they do respond. Maybe they switch to profiles. That's another thing. So what do I mean by this? There's a thing in KakaoTalk where you can have multiple profiles, where you can have their main profile, and then which has their pictures, on it, and then they'll switch you to one that has like a blank profile or a picture of, something else, right? And so you don't really know which profile you're on or if they blocked you. So therefore, all that matters is really hitting them up, seeing if they agree to a date, and if not, moving on to your hot leads. And as I mentioned, every now and then, every month or so, every few weeks or so, going over your old leads, and if you like, sending them a little update, right? All right, so I hope that this was useful, this was helpful. Really, ultimately, to sum it up, it is natural for a certain amount of girls to ghost, to fall out quickly after getting the number. But that being said, the better your interactions are, the better or the higher conversion rate you'll have on girls responding. And the next after that, of course, there's a degree that will just ghost or block. And there are various reasons that are outside of your control, as mentioned, boyfriends, guys they're dating, personal problems, they lost interest, they are nervous about English, and so on and so forth. All right, so this has been a brief podcast, but hopefully helpful to give you a overview of sort of ghosting in Korea. And also, to end this, people have asked me, like, what is your rate on ghosting? If you go out, you know, you approach in the street or in a bar or something like that, how many girls just totally ghost on the first, message or so? And I would say, it comes and goes, but I would say if I go out, if I get 10 numbers that were decent interactions, then even in that case, maybe even two, maybe even three will fall out pretty quickly, whether within the first message or, within the first day or something like that. And then, of course, as time goes on, let's say the next day, let's say, 70-80% respond the next day. And then after that, the numbers kind of fall out as time goes on, right? So therefore, really, if I get 10 numbers, I do expect to get maybe 1-2 dates matching up, right? That's a realistic number to aim for, I would say, to see if you're doing stuff right. 1 or 2 dates out of 10 numbers, right? Of course, sometimes you get 10 numbers, sometimes you'll get several dates, right? Sometimes I'll get 10 numbers, sometimes I'll get 1 date, or 0 even, because maybe I'm busy. Maybe I literally have no time. Maybe a couple girls agree to meet up. I just don't have the time. I'm meeting, I'm coaching, I'm out of town that weekend, and then the numbers fall out. So that being said, just to give you a realistic depiction of what to expect and how things can go. So until next time.